SJ. So what do I tell you next? What's the story that we tell when we introduce ourselves? And how do we edit that story? And what do we leave out? So I could tell you that I'm the preacher tonight. That might be self-evident. I could tell you that I'm the pastor's wife. Probably suggest I shouldn't be standing here. I could tell you I'm an accountant. Well, what relevance does that have to what I'm about to say? I could tell you I've been preaching here for a number of years. That might be relevant. All of those things are true about me, but in the moment that I choose to tell you them, I tell you a part of myself. How we talk about ourselves, how we tell our stories, how we talk about our faith, our passion and our work shapes how other people understand what we say about ourselves and what we say about God. What was the headline for this Samaritan woman? Do we see this as a story of Jesus being kind and generous to an unworthy woman? Some do. Do we see instead a woman of faith who has been wronged by men? Do we see Jesus crossing a social division? And believe me, a Jewish man talking to a Samaritan woman was about as bad as it could get by society standards. To speak to a social outcast. Or do we see Jesus gathering a flock to him? What is the headline of that story? She clearly saw herself one way. She took a risk and admitted a truth that she was living with a man who wasn't her husband, and she'd been married a few times before. But Jesus didn't care about that. What Jesus saw was a woman who would believe, who knew her faith and knew God. The way that we tell a story says a lot. The way that we tell a story impacts the way that the truth is heard, because we all have our own truths. I want to share with you a little bit of this weekend's press coverage. Don't worry, I'm not going to talk about Trump. I'm going to talk about the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, who went to Paris to watch a rugby match. So the Telegraph starts the weekend with Duke and Duchess of Cambridge begin Brexit charm offensive in Paris. It's clearly the only thing that mattered about their trip was the charm that we need to have in order to succeed in the Brexit negotiations. AOL Lifestyle, Duchess Kate shines in sequined blue gown in Paris, because the only thing that matters about this woman is the dress that she's wearing. Sunday Times features Catch Me Kate as she catches a rugby ball. Sunday Express, defiant royals stay calm amidst gun terror in Paris. I hasten to add, in all of the news coverage I've seen over the weekend, there is a little bit on this gun coverage and this gun terror. More to the point, there's a bit about how the guy got arrested. But the defiant royals stay calm. Sunday Telegraph has moved on since, they were charm offensive. We now have Duchess defies Paris terror. And the Mail, using the same photograph as the Sunday Times had for Catch Me Kate, and she's in the same dress that she was wearing for the defiant Paris terror, says, Scrummy mummy, Kate has a ball in Paris. Because, again, the only thing that matters about this woman is that she's a mother. All of those tell the same story. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge went to Paris to watch a rugby match. They went to a ball, and they got dressed up for it. And because they went to see the rugby match, and it happened to coincide with a gun attack, they clearly continued their trip. But by hearing the story in a certain way, we understand certain things. I am sure that the readers of the Mail are very interested in them watching the rugby match, and clearly the Sunday Times is more interested in the terror plot. I'm not quite sure what to do with AOL's sequined blue gown, but that's okay. those headlines are all in this weekend's press about the same event. And the way that we read that story shapes what we think the news is. We either think that there was a rugby match that was quite good, depending on your viewpoint as to which team won. And I'm afraid I'm not a rugby fan, so I don't actually know the answer. Or you think that the news was the gun terror plot. Or you think the news was what Kate was wearing. So Romans is the other reading for today. And in the Romans passage, there's an interesting bit that says, not only that, let us exult too in our hardships, understanding that hardship develops perseverance, and perseverance develops a tested character, something that gives us hope, and a hope that which will not let us down, because the love of God has been poured into our hearts by the Holy Spirit. Now that sounds a little bit weird, but if you understand it one way, which is how I've read it this time, which is that our trials can make us stronger if we can find the blessings. Looking for those blessings in the way that we tell the story is a part of it too. So clearly, pictures taken all at the same time of Duchess Kate. She's either defying a terror plot or she's catching a ball. At the same time, two newspapers decided to focus on the catching of the ball and the rugby game, and two newspapers decided to focus on the terror plot. And we look at the world the same way. We can look right now and say, is the world about to end? Politics is everywhere, it seems to be in disaster. Or do we celebrate the unprecedented amount of political and social action? The Liberal Democrats is the fastest growing political party in this country and raised more money in the last quarter of last year than the Labour Party. That does not mean the Liberal Democrats are going to get elected, although I would personally quite like that. What it does mean is that suddenly people are engaged. They are donating money to political parties. They are joining political parties. They are engaged in petitions and things. The apathetic has gone. Is our government on a path to destruction? We hear about Brexit, we're hearing about independence referendums, we're hearing about debates. Or do we look at those who threaten to defeat the government and note that the budget fell apart after a week because everybody realised they would never get it through a vote? Because people are changing things and they are standing up. How we look at a story and whether we see the blessing in it, whether we see the good or we see the bad, changes the way we look at the world and changes how we talk about it and ourselves. In this country, we have a really long history of celebrating our near misses and virtual defeats as the steps along the way to victory. Now, I grew up watching repeats of movies which celebrated various aspects of World War II. And I'm not a war fan, but there is a certain irony to the fact that we have films about dam busters and Battle of Britain and celebrations about Dunkirk. The plucky Brits who changed the war by doing the impossible. That's the general theme. There's always some brave hero, always a man, who saves the world. But what the movies don't tell you, and the celebration talks little about, is that those were military failures. Dam busters was an unmitigated disaster. So few of the bombs hit their targets, and several of the crews didn't make it home. But they did the impossible. They created a bouncing bomb, which was very interesting. But the amount of effort that went into this, for what was essentially a propaganda coup as opposed to a result for the war, is amazing. The Battle of Britain was won by a huge bluff. Every airworthy plane was in the sky, and on the ground a huge number of wooden plane models were covered in camouflage to make it look like there were lots more. Right? It worked. The German reconnaissance planes decided that they couldn't outgun us. And further fighting was reduced, and that for me is the victory. I don't care. Well, I do care because I'm here. But I would, who won a war is not the point. The fact that the war was shortened matters. Dunkirk was in truth the ultimate disaster. Our troops were on the beaches being gunned down, and every small boat on the south coast, fishing, whatever, went out to try and rescue them. Imagine the headline today if we had to send fishing boats to rescue the army. Would we be celebrating that? But the only real truth that has survived is that there was a success. We hear the stories of the brave people who did things, they did the impossible. What's the story? When we read the news today, how do we edit it? And how is it edited for us? What stories don't get told? I recently decided that actually reading the news on the BBC website and reading the Metro was not actually an adequate substitute for reading and hearing real news. Because the soundbite is too short. What do we miss? If we heard the story of the Samaritan woman and we only heard Jesus met a woman at the well, how much of that have we missed? We've missed her telling the truth about herself. We've missed Jesus talking to a woman about faith and about where to worship and about the living water. We've missed her going off and telling everybody about this, and we've missed Jesus collecting followers. So back to the here and now, to you and me, to what story do we tell about ourselves? What story do we tell about Jesus? What story do we tell about our Lent experience? I'll tell you one of mine. I decided to do an online group with some friends to intentionally spend some time every day in prayer. And I was supposed to be writing my prayers down. And it would appear that I'm not very good at writing things down. It would also appear that when I get really busy, I'm not very good at joining in with this thing. And I have to rededicate myself to it regularly. But I'm doing it because it is feeding my soul just to sit and think about these prayers, even if I don't put them down in writing. I have managed to write 3 prayers, and we're at the end of week 3. So I'm clearly not doing great at it. But in admitting that, there's a strength. Because I know that I'm not perfect. I could have told you that I've joined this great Facebook group and we're writing prayers every day in response to a passage of the Bible. And if I had left the story there, what would you have thought? Are you ready to name the truth about yourself and about what God is calling you to be and to do? Are you ready to spread that truth as she